In. Go!
I have fought under 4 different flags: the YPG, YBS, Ukraine, and the Marine Corps. I don't have a flag for it, but I got a boot tattoo, so that counts. Every one of these reflects its nation. America fights with structure, the Kurds with ideology, the Yazidis with defense, and Ukraine with innovation. How does each one of them fight their battles? Let's start with the Marine Corps, a little baseline, because I know a lot of my audience are veterans or in active duty right now. Super heavy on doctrine. We are driven by our fighters of the past and to go and uphold their honor. The U.S. Marine Corps is unique in a lot of ways. We have our own Air Force in a way. We have our own Navy because we're a part of the Department of the Navy. And we also have our ground forces. I guess we don't have Space Force, but you get the idea. And with that, obviously, we're very into combined arms, being able to work together with all the assets seamlessly. And that's why we have all these branches integral to the U.S. Marine Corps. Now, on the small unit level, the U.S. Marine Corps demands perfection, not only for the subordinate, but also the corporals and sergeants. The NCO Corps is the backbone of the U.S. Marine Corps. So although the U.S. Marine Corps is super hierarchical, the small unit leaders are the ones who make the fine decisions on the ground in the battlefield. Now, one thing about the U.S. Marine Corps that they're trying to get better at is their dependence on logistics, on comms and structure. So structure is just a part of the U.S. Marine Corps. We have a strong structure, just like any military branch that's part of NATO. But the logistics is where it gets a little bit difficult because the U.S. Marine Corps, it is a maritime force. It's probably going to be used to go and defend Taiwan or defend the Philippines. But the problem is they're very small. It's only about 200,000 Marines. And that's including reservists. The actual infantrymen is, I think, 40,000, including reservists. I could be wrong. Somewhere in that ballpark. It's not much. So we do rely on a massive amount of Marines that are in support roles to support the infantry, which is good, but it's also bad. We don't have many infantry Marines. But the cool thing about the infantry is that you train as you fight. Safety comes number 2. It is all about the training. Getting the best training before the war starts, that is super important. I think everybody would agree, especially given Ukraine. You have to have the knowledge of drones beforehand. You have to train with these things, not only as op 4, but also integral to your units before the war starts, and they're doing that. Everything revolves around SOPs, and we're talking everything. CQB, it's every step, and we train the first 3 steps of it for like 8 days straight. We don't get into the room, we just get through the entry for a whole week over and over and over. It is very structured in that way. So the fire team level, they're disciplined, they're coordinated. The Marines work on overwhelming support. We're talking about close air support, artillery, and medevac reliability. Now, I'm not in the U.S. Marine Corps right now, but I hope that they're looking at Ukraine and seeing how difficult it is, not only to get to the front line, but also to get medevacs in, as well as supplies in, if you're gonna be out there for a long time. Drones are changing the game. Now, I'd say the biggest weakness that I saw from 8 years ago is that the bigger Marine Corps is very slow to adapt. And that goes for pretty much the entirety of the U.S. military, in my opinion. It's very difficult for them to get their hands on a drone because it has Chinese parts. There's a lot of things that are keeping the small units from adapting to the realities that they're seeing on their screens all the time. So it's gotta be a little bit mind-numbing that they can't be proactive. I've heard this all throughout the U.S. military, as well as NATO, even beyond NATO. I've talked to many militaries, and it's a difficult thing. So I'm not gonna harp on it too much, but that would be the biggest weakness at this point in time. Now we get into the YPG. This flag was given by an old Marine Corps squad member of mine. He was in Syria at the same time I was. It was kind of cool. But the other 2 flags, those are mine. Anyway, what's the idea of the YPG? It has changed. I'll tell you what. Back when I was in it in 2018, 2019, it was guerrilla. There were guerrilla forces fighting against ISIS, and it was extremely ideological. We had decentralized command. It was communal in a way, where we chose who the team leader was going to be and who the squad leader was going to be. But even then, they didn't have that much authority over us. We could create our own training and create our own gear. Like, people were making their own gear and making their own setups. There was nothing that was coordinated, which is obviously one of the biggest weaknesses, but it's also a plus. It's a guerrilla war, and you gotta let people try new things and adapt to the environment that they're in and the situations they're gonna be placed in. Because guerrillas, you could be in a tunnel one day and then on a rooftop another day. And then in 2019, when we defeated ISIS, we were now a police force. So it changed from heavily guerrilla-centric to kind of a police force, a militia, which was a very strange switch. But nonetheless, being in a guerrilla force, whether it's an active conflict and you're working as guerrillas, or you're keeping checkpoints and you're kind of patrolling through the streets as a policeman, it is based on survival instincts in a lot of ways. Now, we do have a special forces that is trained by the U.S. Marine Corps. We have a special forces that's trained by other NATO countries and other special forces groups, and they act very professional. They have great gear. They were given it by the coalition. But for the vast majority of the YPG, it is AKMs with really bad ammunition. It's been sitting around for 50 years in a tunnel. The biggest biggest point of joining a guerrilla force like this is the belief system. Democratic confederalism, equality, and internationalism. I don't want to forget that. That's a big portion of their belief system. That this fight is a worldwide fight for freedom. And if you don't align with all that, then you're not going to be able to cut it. They're also very big into genealogy, which is feminism. Now, what does the warfare consist of, right? We have AKs, we have RPGs, we have pickup trucks with Zu-23s, Zeus's, IEDs, and urban defenses. Although that's starting to go away and they're starting to dig a little bit more. We had a big tunnel system in Manbij, but it was taken over by the Turkish-backed Al-Qaeda. So it's a little bit difficult. But nonetheless, they're able to switch on a dime like that because they're a guerrilla force. And they instantly adjust to the war and the threats they face. Unlike a typical military like the US Marine Corps. There is a learn as you fight culture. There's no manuals, just experience. And you talk to the people with experience and they teach you what they learned. Now, what are the weaknesses? Well, I already named one, but lack of comms. Radios get jammed. Radios are intercepted as well, so you can't always use radios. And we only have Baofangs. There's a lack of logistics as well, which are based on the communities that we're defending actively. So Turkey will bomb the fields. ISIS will set fire to the fields as well to go and prevent us from getting food because we're sanctioned by every country that surrounds us. So it's really difficult to get food. We were starving, like legitimately starving. So that's the YPG, at least what I experienced 7 years ago.
What's up, buddy?
They're still bombing.
They're still bombing. All right, get inside.
I'm getting, come on. Now we get into the YBS. This one is very similar to the YPG. It's got the same ideology. It's got the same decentralized attitude. But at this point, it's kind of like two different armies, all right? There's the guerrilla army, which I was a part of, residing in the tunnels, preparing it to go and let the civilians come in if Shangal gets invaded again. And then we also have the local militia that are made up by the Yazidi population that we're protecting that act as police forces or QRF forces. And the mindset is defensive in nature. Anybody who comes in, they got to stop by a checkpoint. We got to check out who you are. That's the whole reason it was made, because there was Al-Qaeda suicide bombings that killed like 1,000 Yazidis back in early 2000s. And then ISIS invaded, and the armies that promised the Yazidis protection, the Peshmerga as well as the Iraqi army, they fled. So the only ones who stood their ground was the YBS. So the whole mindset is defensive. Protect the people of Sinjar with your lives, no matter the threat, which includes drones and jets. That's why the tunnels exist. Now we operate in mountainous terrain as well as urban. We have a lot of cities that surround the Sinjar mountains that we're able to get logistics in or whatever we need, but we always bring it back to the mountain because that's where we're going to be conducting our operations. We have homemade Katyushas, Grad rockets, we have Zu-23s, all of them underneath the ground in bunkers, and it's very based on small unit ambushes, raids, and overall just a static defense. We put up barbed wire, we set up IEDs everywhere, but the IEDs were always an issue because the goats from the shepherds, they would have like 200 sheep climb up our mountain, and they always like nibbling on the cords, which is annoying. What are our weaknesses? Obviously, a limited offensive capability. We're not meant to be offensive, so our offensives are based on small units that are able to get in from different tunnel sections, and this seems to be very similar to what I was observing in Gaza. And what you can tell from what happened there, after the IDF occupied Gaza, Hamas was not able to punch out and attack any other cities outside of Gaza, but it was very difficult to contain them inside the tunnels or inside the cities or among the populace because they were hiding in the tunnels. They were able to come out and do small raids and such. So our whole mentality, living in this giant tunnel network of 100+ kilometers, was to be like mosquitoes. Anybody who occupies this will constantly be swatting at these freaking gorillas. And the next one, we gotta talk about Ukraine. Heavily inspired by NATO at this point, but the reason I was able to adapt so well into Ukraine was because there is a guerrilla level adaptability. This is pretty obvious. This is the stuff I love. There is a drone warfare revolution, and it all started with Ukraine. They were the first ones to use Mavics as integral parts of the unit, as well as FPVs. They started it all. Now, I've been in many different units in Ukraine, but the last one I was in was under a contract for the first time. But that should tell you something. I've been a part of other units. I've been on operations without a contract. So it does have quite a bit of decentralized command, depending on what role you're in. So when it comes to PT, when it comes to the funding you get, a lot of that's on your shoulders. The command isn't gonna be on your back trying to force you to do something. You're gonna have to go out there and you're gonna have to get it. You're gonna have to get the funding. You're gonna have to put in the effort for PT. You're gonna have to get your own house to get closer to the front line. But at the same time, operations are scheduled by your command. And if you do not go on that operation, you will be reprimanded. You could even be put in jail. So it's kind of a combination of all the groups I was a part of. So as far as the weaponry, it is tech driven. It's all about improvisation. It's all about using tech because Ukraine is facing up against this massive bully, like 200 million people that are paying $65,000 for a 6-month contract in the military. It's really, really bad. Ukraine doesn't have that manpower advantage, so they have to relegate it to drones and unmanned systems. Anything they can get their hands on, but also maintaining the offensive capability which the YPG and YBS didn't have. They have to be able to retake land. When I was making this drone for the Ukrainian front line, we planned a whole operation based on this weapon system I made. When I threw it up to my command, they said, just put an encryptor on it and we'll be okay with it. That way they can't find out where your position is and the guys don't get smoked. Perfect. Too easy. I did that. We sent them out there and we started bombing targets with improvised bombs, with bombs that we made, with fire bombs that the other team made. It is constant innovation on the battlefield.
We gotta sit down.
Of course, being the most brutal war since World War II, there's a lot of casualties on both sides, mostly the Russian side, but of course Ukraine has sustained casualties. We all know some people who have been injured or killed. But Ukraine's mentality is based on nationalism, it's based on victory, it's based on morale. Whenever you have your off time in Ukraine, you go to the city and you chill out. You get a drink, you go to a hotel. Which is probably very different than living on a fob and just being surrounded by the same guys, still eating MREs in some cases. It's pretty dope. If you're 20 kilometers away from the front line, odds are you're getting coffee, you don't have your plate carrier on. There's very little rules when it comes to that too. SOPs are very team level. The hierarchy is not as strong as the Marine Corps. That's what I'm trying to get at. Now, what are the weaknesses? Obviously, the unit standards are gonna be fragmented. It's not gonna be the same for every unit, even on the team level. And that goes for training as well. All the units have very different training. There's different boot camps, there's different SOPs, different protocol for everything, all based on your small unit leadership. So it's guerrilla-esque in that way, but I don't think that's Ukraine's end goal with their military. I think it's just because they've made their military into what it is today during a war, and it has to be like this at this point. They don't have any time to collect themselves and figure things out on a structural level. And of course, war is fought differently everywhere. Every war is different, but courage looks the same no matter what uniform you wear. And that's something anybody will tell you who's been in war. That's all I want to say. Those are the differences of the groups that I was in, and I hope you got something from it. I certainly did. All right, see you guys later. Peace.